Hello, my name is Zachariah Van Sliders with Old Man Gaming, and you have decided to tune in to another horrible game review. Before we get into things, obviously we've got some disclaimers. Part-time house dad, I put everything I can into this, but sometimes it doesn't come out so well, so please excuse the raw version of this. Number 2, I don't give scored reviews to video games. I don't believe in scored reviews for video games because I think it's one of the most subjective forms of art. So you're going to get the overview of the game, the pros and the cons from my point of view, as all reviews are, and I'm going to tell you whether I'm going to stick with the game or not. Alright, number 3, I usually don't get a ton of time with the games. I've had a little bit more with this one than I usually do, but I usually don't get a ton of time with the games. This is kind of an everyman's look at it. I'm just trying to give you an idea as to whether you should play it or not, just as a person out there maybe making impulse buys. If you want a really in-depth review, there are places to get that, and I urge you to seek those out. And I got a couple of special disclaimers right now, because you're probably asking a couple of questions. The first question being, why am I reviewing Division 2? The game is at least a year old. And number 2, why is my review coming out on a Sunday instead of a Monday? There's 2 reasons for that, guys. And by 2, I mean 1. The fact is, I am reviewing this game because right now there is a spectacular Ubisoft publisher sale in the digital store going on. And you can actually pick up this AAA game for $3. That's right, $2.99. It's 95% off right now in the digital store. And this only lasts, however, until the 24th on Monday. And I didn't feel it was fair to give you guys less than 24 hours to decide to make this purchase, especially if you're listening to this at work or, you're watching this in a place where you can't just go home and buy a game. I figured it would be good to address this a little bit early. Personally, I saw this as a chance to step back into the game. I actually bought it at release, played it for a while, and ended up trading it back in. It just didn't turn out to be for me. That being said, $3 for this game, I had to go back in. I had to jump back in and see what's going on in this game. And I did. I've played a few hours of it, and I'm about to tell you all about it. So what is The Division 2? Okay, The Division 2 is a weird, interesting take on a post-apocalyptic setting. Basically, this evil virus gets released that's on money, so it destroys like city centers real fast, and everything turns into like anarchy, like it's like a super flu. And a lot of this is covered in the first Division, which takes place in New York. Now, this game takes place in Washington, D.C., primarily. There is a DLC coming out called Warlords of New York where you step back to New York, and they also are going to increase the level cap and do a bunch of other changes that unfortunately I will not be able to address in this review because none of them have happened, and I am not probably going to buy Warlords of New York. That being said, what do you do in this game? Well, you're tasked with heading in and slowly trying to rebuild some semblance of civilization. You do this first by setting up a base of operations at the White House, and then setting out into this post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C. that has been divided into 4 different warring factions. Caught in between are the civilians that live in these settlements that you have to go to, and you have to help repair and fix and, collect people to do stuff. Your average open world game setting from that point of view. Now, it should be noted, however, this is a live games as service game, much in the same vein as like Destiny, or, God forbid I mention it, Anthem. Basically what this is it's always online, and it urges you to play with other players. But really, unlike those other games, you're not going to be playing with those other players unless you choose to. You can play this very, very alone. And so far, at least, I haven't noticed any downside to playing alone, other than possibly loneliness. The game takes place in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different things to do, from control points that you capture from enemy factions, to side missions and main missions that you do for loot and upgrades and equipment and stuff like that. There's also tons of world events that just happen. There could be civilians walking around, you gotta protect them. There's convoys you have to protect, propaganda things that show up that you have to take down, all sorts of stuff. as you progress through the game, you slowly take down these factions, you slowly recruit more division officers and other allies, and you slowly take back Washington, D.C. With the aesthetic, it's very interesting because it kind of feels like Mad Max, but with a touch of that realistic Tom Clancy in it. And that's what's really interesting about this, is the aesthetic. I don't think that there's another aesthetic like this. Like, nobody ever does the post-apocalyptic super realistic like this. And that makes it kind of interesting. There is plenty of loot to be had, and loot will be your primary facility for gaining statistics and buffs and, you know, building your loadout, much in the same vein as Destiny. There's not really abilities or powers like, you know, a Borderlands or anything like that. Instead, they give you these like special pieces of tech, like a drone or a ballistic shield, stuff like that that you can unlock after you complete so many story missions. Then you can unlock different variations of that with special tech upgrades that you acquire. I'm not going to go into everything you can upgrade and modify in this game. Suffice to say, it's a lot. Anything in this game has some sort of mod slot or some sort of upgrade component, and that is probably, we'll get into it as a pro, but one of the more interesting things is there is so many ways to look at the gear and the loot and the powers that you get in this game. Each gear also gives you some sort of statistical buff. You get a red, a yellow, and a blue buff. The red buff always gives you some sort of combat buff, and these are much more varied than your blue or your yellows. They'll be like crit pluses to crit shot, pluses to damage on elites, all sorts of weird, very specialized things, whereas your blue is usually just health, a percentage of health, or some sort of regeneration capabilities, and then yellow is straight up just skill power. Skill power is something you need to activate the modifications on some of your higher end, they call them skills, but they're the big pieces of technology like the ballistic shield and the chem launcher and stuff like that. So you will go into all these places, all these missions, you will explore DC post-apocalyptic, and you will just collect and collect and collect loot and loot and loot on top of loot, and on top of all that, they also added in this thing called this project system. The project systems being that you will get blueprints to craft for yourself back at your home base if you aid the settlements in building something up. These projects usually involve some sort of task-based checklist, like aid to hostage situations or take down 2 propaganda centers. Then there's this really interesting kind of trick to it called donations. Now you can donate to control points just your raw supplies, like water, food, and components that you find out in the world, and then you can also donate your useless equipment or old equipment to complete these projects. Okay, so there's very little more to discuss about the overview. So I want to get into the pros and the cons. The first pro, and this pro is a limited time pro, as in it only takes place until the sale is over, and that is this game is worth $3. It's worth way more than $3. This is a huge price, and I don't know, even if you don't like live as a service games, even if this doesn't seem like a game that's up your alley, $3, it's worth it. It's worth it. You will get $3 out of it. That being said, let's move on to some other pros. The next pro is the versatility of this game. There is, like I said before, there is so many ways to look at it, and we're actually going to discuss this in the cons too, but for now we'll stick to the pros. There's so many ways to look at weapons, so many ways to modify them, so many ways to tweak your build. Now, of course, you don't have straight stats, straight abilities, but the fact that you can modify different weapons, and you can modify even your pieces of armor, you can modify even your special tools, like everything is modifiable so that you can really tweak the character to be exactly what you want it to be when you're out in the field playing the game. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed that part of it. I like the fact that I can build my character around a shotgun build, and he's actually useful, which in these very realistic shooter games they usually aren't. My next pro is the intelligence basis of the actual combat system. So one thing I've noticed about like your Borderlands and your Destiny is in those games the shooting is fun and it feels good. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it feels a little spongy. You're pouring rounds of ammo into your opponents and hoping that you have high enough stats that they don't do enough damage to you to knock you down. That's when you really dilute it down to that. That's what it is. It's not. It's very rarely some sort of like elaborate combat puzzle or you have to think your way out of a fight. This game is different. These enemies can take you down. I mean, you can get over-leveled to certain areas and then you just murder everything, but if you're in an area that's leveled to you, you really have to consider how you go into a firefight and how you fight with it. I really like the tools also. They recharge fast, so you can really consider how you go into a fight. And I noticed that I had a strategy going in, and I rarely had a strategy in the other games. The other games were get the best loot, go in and kill everything. Whereas this one, I found if I did that, I would die. Whereas I really had to like think about, okay, there's 7 guys here. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get behind the group of them. I'm going to drop my weird little drone shooter. It's going to start taking out the 7. Then I'm going to take out the snipers. Then I'll play cleanup. I like that. I like how that goes around to it. My next pro. This pro is a big one for me when it comes to games as service. Division 1 did the same thing, and Division 2 does it just as good. And that is they really do the playing with other people optional thing right. One thing about Destiny, you drop onto a planet, everybody on that planet is on that planet, they're running around. They can get into your public events, they can get into whatever you do. Destiny does it good where, like, if you go into a mission, they're not there, but a lot of these games of service or MMOs and stuff like that just have people running around everywhere. They're just getting into your space, and it takes away from the magic for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I want to play with other people. I like these lives of service games, and I like that social component, but I don't always want it. With Division, the way it works is the people on your server, you can see them when you're both in a safe house or in your main base, but you cannot see them if they're not partied up with you when you walk out into the interactable world. That is absolutely exquisite. I can't tell you how much that I love that. So, like, I'm online. I do feel like I'm playing with other people, but at the same time, they're not messing with the stuff that I don't want to be messed with. And that's really cool. I like that. With this, it doubles down on ease of getting with other people's game. They have these backup requests. You just hit backup request if you need players to play with you, and you can immediately join somebody else's game in free roam or in the mission to aid them. Then they have a matchmaking at the beginning of most of the story missions so that you can drop it in 4 other players, and then, you know, they disband when you're done. So I really enjoyed that. That was nice. It was a real optional level on whether I was playing with people or not, and I like that. I don't like being force-fed the social components of these games. Okay, let's move into cons. Now, I do want to say real quick before I continue, I've only gotten to level 18. The level cap is at 30, so I haven't gotten to do some of the bigger stuff. I know that there's like a weapon specialization thing when you get to level 30. There's also strongholds, which are like this game's version of raids, I guess. I haven't gotten to that level. I can't review that, and I don't have time to get there. So I'm at level 18. That's going to be the highest I get before this review. So just everybody keep that in mind, that I haven't seen necessarily the end game of this. So with that being said, let's get into the cons in my point of view. The first con is the complication. It's unfortunately, with all that versatility that I talked about in the pros, which with all the ways to loot, the ways to change your loot, the ways to craft your loot, it gets really intimidating. And as a person who dropped out of it then came back to it, I almost didn't keep playing just because I had a really hard time figuring out what I was doing and what was going on at first. And of course, eventually I got it. Eventually I fell into it, but the tutorials don't do enough to really explain stuff, especially the stats and the modifications. It really just doesn't do enough to explain to you everything that you can do in this game and everything you can go through. Of course, I know a lot of people are against tutorials out there because they find them boring, so I'm not quite sure how to fix this, but at the same time, I I really wanted a little bit more direction, and this game doesn't give you any. My next con is in the writing. The writing feels a little stilted to me. I can't imagine that Tom Clancy actually has something to do with the writing on this, because it's very hoorah, F everybody out there sort of language. Specifically, I can think of when you rescue the president in one mission. I guess spoilers, but they're not big spoilers. You rescue a president in one mission. He shows up and he's just like, I'm all about kicking ass, and everybody's like, yeah, so am I. And it's just very like, I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm not sure that it'd rub everybody the wrong way. Like I said, I don't have any problem with like military stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the writing felt almost like very stilted, very like somebody chugged a bunch of Red Bull and was like, yeah, this is what a badass would say, and so I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the dialogue, and all the interactions kind of felt this way. Like every character has this like chip on their shoulder and talks in this really specific sort of way, and I don't know, it just kind of felt cliche. It felt really cliche. Every character felt really cliche, and that bothered me. It made it hard for me to engage as well as I would have liked on this one. So my final con is sometimes the world, and which is weird because they really tried. You can see that they tried for this not to feel that way, but the world feels like you're just kind of like watching it sometimes. It's very hard to explain this con, but it doesn't really like interact to you as much as I would like, or engage you as much as I would like. It's more of a here's a thing, go do a thing sort of situation. And while a lot of times I like that, there's just something about this where I wish that there's just, I don't know, I didn't feel as connected, and it could go back to the writing. I didn't feel as connected to the settlements. I didn't feel as connected to the home base as I do in some other games. Like State of Decay is procedural generation, and it's a lot of the interactions are kind of junky, but for some reason, I feel connected to every character in that game, and every part of that settlement. Whereas this one, as far as post-apocalyptic goes, it's not. It just doesn't engage me the way some of the other games do. So just keep that in mind when you're playing. I don't know if that'll affect you. I mean, I bought this game at launch. I played it up until like level 11, I think, and then I ended up trading it back in. I got bored of it, and I don't know if that's going to happen this time or not. But I like games as service. I like games like this, so there's got to be something in that. But still, worth $3, guys. Worth $3. So am I going to stick with it? Only time will tell on this one. I can't give a definitive answer on this one. I want to say yes, I am enjoying it. I am enjoying playing it. But, it's one of those that, like, without my friends getting into it, and wanting to get online with me and wanting to play with me, I don't know that this is one that I would just keep going back to over and over again. Right now I'm playing it and I'm having fun with it. Again, I really think it's worth the $3 that they're charging. Like, it's definitely worth the $3. So I urge anybody out there who has any inkling whatsoever to try this game to try this game for $3. It's nothing. And if you do, hit me up. Disciple Hard Rock, all one word, but skip the C in rock. And I will play with you happily. Alright, that's it for our review of The Division 2. Again, the sale ends on the 24th. It is $3 right now, so if you want this game, this is your absolute last chance to get it. It is worth $3 in my opinion. But hey, if it's not up your alley, then maybe it isn't worth it. But in any case, if you decide to buy it, enjoy it, hit me up, I'll play with you. And as usual, check out everything Old Man Gaming has to offer. And we have these reviews every Monday, usually, in addition to a whole host of other things that you can check out on our channel. And if you like any of it, please subscribe and turn notifications on. And finally, as usual, if you guys keep watching and listening, we will keep making it. We'll see you next time.